Gargi, let me start this program with a question to you very directly.
What do you mean?
At 1 minute and 48 seconds past the hour of 3 o'clock Central Standard Time, bumper to bumper, name of the show. When do good things happen for a basketball offense?
When do good things happen? Well, the great Rick Majerus would say, offense is spacing, spacing is offense. And what I think he meant by that is the ball needs to move, the ball needs to be shared, you need to have good spacing, and then good things happen.
I think Mr. Majerus reminded us from time to time as well that good things happen when you take the ball to the basket.
Oh, that's a good one.
Now, that can be preceded by the sort of ball movement that you're talking about. But when you take the ball to the basket, even in a three-point dominated league, some remarkable things can happen. I'm looking at the play-by-play from yesterday's beyond improbable 131-128 Timberwolves overtime victory over the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I have in front of me the fourth quarter of the ball game, okay? When it obviously looked like it was over until it, frankly, was not over. For example, 5:10 to go in the game. This is when Anthony Edwards is still in. He makes the first of two free throws, then the second of two free throws. Let's just go with the Wolves scoring from that point forward. Terrence Shannon makes a two-point shot off of a Nickeil Alexander-Walker assist. Terrence Shannon makes a free throw. Terrence Shannon makes a second free throw. Nickeil Alexander-Walker makes a free throw. Nickeil Alexander-Walker makes the second of two free throws. Now, every once in a while, a clutch three doesn't hurt. Naz Reid hit one from 26 feet with 2:17 to go. At that point, the lead is down to single digits, 9 points, 121-112 in favor of Okie City. Still, you think, in position, obviously, to win the game. But let's move ahead. Naz Reid, driving layup. Rob Dillingham, driving layup. Jaden McDaniels, free throw, 1 of 2. Jaden McDaniels, free throw, 2 of 2. Jaden McDaniel, 2-foot, 2-point shot on a Rob Dillingham assist with 11.2 seconds to go, and he makes a free throw as well to complete the 3-point play. And that's how it ends in regulation. We have now tied them 121-121. We outscore them 10-7 in the OT. May I submit to you that if Anthony Edwards continues to play in that game, the Wolves do not win it?
Well, in there's a step-back three that did not get made, and then correct. I think Shea went down and went right to the rim.
And a turnover before then he got pulled with was it a calf injury?
Yes.
Whatever it is. Now, again, he obviously had a key block and a good defensive stand. You know, he became a trooper, said, I'll come back in there and I'll help and I'll do the dirty work and I won't even worry about scoring. Look, I'm not going to pretend that what took place last night is a blueprint for the Wolves' future because it's too improbable that it happened at all. You have to have some of your main pieces clearly involved. There was a number of factors that came together. But it did dovetail nicely with what we talked about early in yesterday's program, which was too often down the stretch of games in which the Wolves are trying to come from behind. And this is another problem, by the way. We're behind way too much. That, to me, is the part of the story we didn't spend enough time on yesterday. But the fact of the matter is the offense looked very different because it was in attack mode. It was not in retreat and just jack up jump shots mode. And that was the large reason why the comeback was even possible to take place. I think we didn't miss a free throw in the fourth again, by the way. Our free throw accuracy the last few games has been ridiculous. Can that continue? I don't know. But all of that's what fascinated me looking at this, the number of just going to the basket, getting fouled, making something happen on the way there, taking Parrish the thought a 2-point shot, or even a mid-range shot as well. And the kids, it's almost like the kids don't even know any better. You know, they're in that mode right now.
They're just out there playing.
They're just out there, like I said, fearlessly going at, especially Terrence Shannon, who he seems at times just irrepressible. Now, he got caught on at least one charge. That's going to happen because of the bull in the China shop approach. But there's something appealing, I think, and refreshing about, I'm just going until they stop me, right? I'm just going. And I don't think I can be stopped on a given occasion. And all of that added to or contributed to a very improbable finish. And as I said, the regular Wolves offense with, dare I say it, more regulars who are out. And that game is a distant memory. I don't even think we win it. Do you?
I don't.
They just went about it completely. And maybe every play was called. I don't know. I doubt it, though.
No.
I think individual players and maybe even team, working together, moving the ball a little bit, there was more of a, we're going downhill. We're going after this thing. We got nothing to lose. This is what we're going to do. We're either going to score under the basket, we're going to get a layup, or we're going to get fouled, or if we're lucky, both, and we'll take our chances about how it might come out.
And a lot of that started from what was happening on the other end of the floor, where Oklahoma City started missing shots more than they had the last couple of nights. They did a good job getting it out of Alexander's hands.
They did.
And then,
you know what they did? They blitzed them.
They blitzed them up top.
I love the cliche.
What I did like is once he got rid of the ball, his cousin, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, just stayed with him. He just said, you get away from it. We're going to make these other four guys figure something out. And they didn't do it enough, but also the rebounding was better. I know there were a few offensive rebounds that they gave up, but they didn't pay for it. And they were physical on the glass. They were physical defensively. And that, I thought, brought the energy up. And a lot of those were quasi-transition plays as well, certainly with Shannon, where you get the stop, you get a good rebound. I'm sure Oklahoma City just kind of fell asleep because they're looking like this is the white flag.
Yeah.
You've got all these kids out here. And that's why it was fun, because the energy was just contagious the entire time once those guys really started rolling, and it translated to both sides of the floor.
4:22 to go. The Wolves are down 12. Anthony Edwards misses the proverbial 27-foot three-point step-back jump shot. And then about, looks like 30 seconds later, Anthony Edwards loses the ball in a turnover. A Dort steal. At that point, the Thunder have the ball in a 14-point lead. They probably hit, Jalen Williams no, he did hit that shot. That actually, they increased it to 16 points after that.
Right.
121-105. And I think it was about then, was it not, that Finchie pulled Edwards, if I'm not mistaken. But that's the irony of this thing. Is the last two memorable plays in regulation by Edwards were a long shot missed, which is what happens down the stretch. That's what we're always seemingly left with. He's just going to jack it up. And then a turnover, which often is part of it as well. I meant to get a soundbite from you. We can maybe even do it tomorrow. It was almost like he was reading my mind, and it was the SiriusXM morning show with Frank and Scal. And Scal was playing off a quote from Edwards about being double teamed, blitzing. We decided to give them a dose of their own medicine. The way they blitzed me, we blitzed Gilgeous-Alexander. And there was something else in the quote about doubling and getting the ball back and whatever. And it was brilliant from Scal. And Scal said, you know what? He needs to talk. Anthony Edwards needs to have a talk with two people. One of them is Steph Curry. The other, who is the Celtics' best player?
Jason Tatum.
He said, because he said Tatum especially had to learn over a period of time that if you get the ball too quick, get it back too quickly on the double team, where, all right, we're going to take it out of your hands, but you're going to get it right back, that it's the worst thing that can be done for you as a player, that you can't be impatient about getting the ball back, that you have to be a little bit more deliberate in that approach, and that's part of what Anthony Edwards has to learn. And that, too, was precisely what we were talking about on yesterday's program. I gave up. I'll admit it. Not only did I fall asleep on this game, And this was an early game, okay? And then I woke up, but I never bought, because when I fell asleep, it was, 15 points probably, but it was enough to say, they're not going to come back. And I didn't bother for once in my life to check X all that much the rest of the night. So I literally did not know the team came back until like 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm reading out of StarTribune.com.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the headline. I go, what?
Right.
Are you kidding me? Is that even possible?
Yeah.
But
we had similar experiences because I learned about it this morning. But the distinction would be I didn't fall asleep. I went to bed.
Yeah, you just said I've had enough.
I made the conscious decision to turn it off. It wasn't like I was watching it and dozed off like we do on late night Twins games, and then Jimmy Haney, the golf show, comes on, and that's why I woke up. I made a straight up decision to turn the TV off, put my head on the pillow, probably throw in a podcast, and go to bed. I straight up just went to bed. I think they were down 20 in the third at that point because it's schedule loss, as we know. Back to back, you're probably not going to win it. They're making every shot. I felt perfectly comfortable going to bed and saying, I don't feel like I'm going to miss anything.
No,
thankfully,
reasonable.
Before all of that, like 2 hours later, my wife had said, do you want me to record the Wolves game? Because we had to go put the kids to bed. So I was able to watch it this morning and later on. So we got it all figured out.
It also is, I think, true that the Okie City played with almost no big men in the fourth quarter because who's the guy from the Knicks? Hartenstein?
Yeah.
I think he got his nose broke on the back of Jaden McDaniel's head. And then I don't think he came back. And obviously our local big man who plays for them,
Chet,
it was a back-to-back and they sit him. They're cautious with him to this point.
Right.
So again, that also I'm sure contributed. The fact that Hartenstein wasn't there, I'm sure contributed, made it easier for the Wolves kids to get in there, but don't apologize for it. Get in there if you have the opportunity to do it, which this team did again and again and again down the stretch of that ball game. And they flat out, if they keep playing Anthony Edwards, they don't win it. They don't. I don't think because they're so conditioned to play a certain way with him, and that got abandoned. That they didn't have to worry. The kids didn't have to worry about that because Edwards was at that point not in the ball game. We're going to switch dramatically when we come back. I'll set up the rest of the guest lineup for today. But football conversation when we come back. It is, after all, Combine Week, and our guy Peter Bercich will file a live report after our two chief brain wizards spoke earlier today. Of course, the head coach and the general manager of your Minnesota Vikings. Peter Bercich is next.
I've had great dialogue with Sam, from the time the season ended up until very, very recently. And I think my relationship with Sam has grown to a point where, the respect level is sky high. And this process is going to play out both short term and long term for the Minnesota Vikings. And Sam is in a position where the NFL thinks he can play quarterback at a high level. So that's a really good thing, and I feel very proud to be a part of helping him get to this point, and we'll see kind of where it goes from here.
Audio always sounds better when it originates in Indianapolis, Indiana. That, of course, is where the Combine has begun. Peter Bercich is there. He joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. How many years have you counted up now? The number of years you've been coming to the Combine?
I got to go here when I was coming out of college, and then I didn't make my return until last year. So it has not been an every year event for me until recently.
I didn't realize that. I thought you usually went along with PA. Good. Yeah. Okay. Good. So in your current role, what do you try to get out of it?
Information, what teams are thinking, how teams see certain things. And it's also a good chance to catch up with people that you only see maybe a handful of times a year, guys you played with or against, or guys you coached with or against. I mean, so in that regard, it's always a lot of fun. And you get to, you meet new people along the way. And so it's a bit of a convention on that end, which is amazing how much it's changed and how much the NFL has just embraced the media side of it. So, but listening to the coaches talk and catching them, this is a different time of year. There's not a lot of pressure. Yeah. They're going to keep their jobs for one more season. Those decisions are pretty much made by now. So, a little bit less stress on most of these guys.
So how much do you have to guard against misinformation and or subterfuge? Because the part of me that always feels like, well, these guys, they want to really protect and hold close to the vest their best information or their best analysis about a given player. Or is that stuff widely shared about so-and-so looking like, God, this guy looks like he's going to be a first-round draft choice, whatever? How do you go about figuring out what's real and what is, sort of part of the game that some of these general managers and personnel people play?
Yeah, you hear certain things, and then you just ask the question, and then listen for their response. And in a lot of ways, it's like how they do it. And you do this, I'm sure, and you know exactly what I'm talking about here. When you sit down with these players and get a chance to interview them, most of the difficult questions and things are all scripted.
Yeah, right.
So it's not necessarily what they say; it's kind of how they say it. Right? Are they robotic? Are they, do you feel like you get to know this person or do you connect with this person? And then, for us, we can ask the question and then just kind of listen. You don't expect to get an answer, right?
Yeah, right.
You just kind of listen and watch to see, can I read between the lines? And then, at that end of it, it's not, we're not breaking news here. We're not here to get a scoop. We're not here to get rumors. We're just here to kind of get a feel for what's going on. And that's kind of the best way, I think, at doing it is just go with your gut.
Yeah.
And throw some things out there and see if people bite or if they don't want to touch it. Right? So that's every bit of that tells you at least some type of information.
It's the age-old debate that has gone on forever, and I think continues to go on to a degree. As this event has gotten bigger, I think there's been the possibility that teams can, and even fans who now, I don't have to tell you, they're on every moment of this thing now. It's become that big. They tend to then potentially run into the trap of making it only about the workout or making it only about what the measurables might be. So how do you get the best out of what this event has to offer in terms of any GM, in terms of evaluating, without losing sight of the fact that there ain't no games being played here and there's no scrimmages taking place here?
Right. I think one of the best ways is when you show up here is to have a plan. And, as specific of a plan as possible, meaning, we like this player A and player B, and even, just have a plan for everyone that you're going to sit down with. We like everything about this guy, but we have some questions over here. So we're going to, we're going to try to address those, and not just show up and kind of wing it or just wait for someone to stand out and impress you. I think you have to have a plan really going into this and have reasonable expectations about what you hope to ascertain from all of these guys. Because again, they're all, they're all so well coached. And as far as the physical abilities, I mean, it's important. Unfortunately, that's kind of how the first round kind of falls out. Height, weight, speed means a lot, and that's kind of a deal where it's a kind of a CYA, right? The ability to run fast and jump high means you should be, if you're very athletic, you should be a good football player. So you're not. It's definitely not the scout's fault. It's the coach's fault. I got to be able to coach these guys up, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, that goes back, but they see athletic ability as potential, right?
Sure.
And part of that problem is like, well, he's had this speed his whole entire career, and if there's still some question marks, or he hasn't shown this type of speed on film, then maybe he just doesn't run and go 100% on film. And that's again, Dan, kind of what you're doing here is things that don't fit, things that stick out. Right, some guy that was a good player, not great, but good player, and then he comes down here and lights it up physically, and then you got to ask yourself, what's going on with that? Why doesn't he look like he runs a 4.340 on film? Right, and that's kind of the process.
We started the segment with a soundbite from the head coach Kevin O'Connell earlier today. Clearly asked about Sam Darnold. to a certain extent, I guess it remains the key. The Darnold domino remains the key to explain a lot of other moves that this team might or might not make this offseason. Now, the sense I've gotten from several of the media jackals who cover this team every day is that they believe more than ever that it's very likely that the Darnold ship has sailed, that they will be not necessarily stunned, but definitely surprised if he ends up back here, that the handwriting's on the wall. There's enough demand out there, enough teams that need quarterbacks that he's going to get a contract that's going to make it very difficult, no matter what the Vikings would like to do, to keep him here. What does your gut tell you about where Darnold ends up?
Well, I think the more I talk to people, and had a few of those discussions today, because you take a look at, for example, The Athletic, and they had come out with their list of free agents, and Darnold, I think, is number 8. And then you speak to a couple people that, have been around and thought, and they say that Darnold is the number 1 free agent this offseason.
Interesting.
Because he's a quarterback, right?
Yep.
If Darnold is the number 1 free agent, if that's truly how these teams and how, because it only takes one, but how they're looking at him, he's, goodbye. He's a goner. I mean, but then on the other side, you could say, well, if he is, then maybe you could find it, slap a franchise tag on him and trade him away and maybe get something for him. So, it's a little bit all over. It's a little bit all over the board, but the one thing that is across the board is they were surprised at how well he played. And then next question is kind of what happened toward the end of the season, and you go into that discussion. But no, there's no doubt that he might be looked at a higher level than even we expected. We expected him to be important free agent, and he's going to get an opportunity to play somewhere else and start. No question about that. But man, I mean, to be the number 1 free agent going into 2025, that's a pretty remarkable jump in value, and from what you thought maybe coming into this.
Peter Bercich, Dateline, Indianapolis, Indiana. I don't think have spoken either on or off air since the season ended as abruptly, or the postseason ended as abruptly as it did. And you mentioned that, there's always going to be interest in, okay, well, he was great until he wasn't. What happened the last couple of weeks? How do you look back now that we have, the emotions are a little clearer, we're a little further away, we're past the adrenaline stage. What do you think happened to him, specifically this offense more generally, those last couple games?
Yeah, and this again is my opinion and my opinion alone. It doesn't. Number one, it doesn't take much to go from, looking. It's not a quantum leap, right? It's to go from being a great quarterback and then not looking so hot. It doesn't. It's not. I just want folks to understand that you don't just go from great to terrible in a week, right? And that margin of error is pretty tight. But I look back and in the beginning of the offseason, and he was sacked, I believe, 57 times throughout this season. I think it was somewhere in there.
Yep.
Somewhere in the mid-50s. And looking at the sack numbers, obviously the Bears led the league in that, which, go Bears. But you have to, at some point, that's going to take its toll. At some point, in my opinion, that is going to start to affect the way you either follow through or go through your progressions or your footwork. And I really think that toward the end of the season, he just didn't look to me as sharp, if you will, maybe that he did at the beginning of the season. I think that being hit that many times really, my opinion, took a little bit of a toll on him, or enough of a toll on him, that the Lions lined up and pressed it and said, hey, we are either going to hit you and bring you to the ground, or you're going to put up 48 points against us. And they laid it on the line and were successful in what they did.
I think that's fair to say. Do you view, if indeed Darnold is gone, the assumption is that this team would like to bring Daniel Jones back in the Darnold role. Maybe not starting. Maybe JJ is starting, even from the beginning of the season, or maybe you let it play on the training camp. But do you expect that Jones is going to be in this mix in 2025?
I would absolutely think so. I mean, you had him around for a few weeks toward the end of the season, and even just that little bit of time is very informative, I think, for the coaches. Number two, the other part is there may not be another. He may have a better opportunity somewhere else. I think the Vikings put their best foot forward with him to show him what this franchise is like and how they go about their business to get him to want to stay here. And then they have to be honest with him and say, it'll be a competition, just like it was going into the season last year with JJ and Darnold. If it's going to truly be a competition, and not just saying, hey, we need you, until the young guy's ready, or, if you're honest and he's willing to take that risk, you'd love to have him. I mean, from a height, weight, speed, talk about height, weight, and speed and combine numbers and all, Daniel Jones is unbelievably impressive.
That's
he
true.
He is a big man and has, unbelievable arm strength, the whole, all the tools. So he's like Darnold 2.0. And I think if you put anybody like that in this situation, that Coach O'Connell is going to get the best out of him.
If you had to go to Vegas today to lay a bet on who will start the 2025 regular season for the Vikings, Danny Dimes or the kid JJ, who are you putting the money on?
Oh, that's a tough question. I would have to think JJ right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think with what they did to bring him in, he's the future of the franchise. They need to get him. They need to get him out there. And so I think that JJ McCarthy's had a good year. Right, you have a year to learn and see how things go, learn the language of an offense. So I think I do think he'll win that spot and be our day one starter.
What is Peter Bercich looking for the Vikings to try to get out of this draft? We know that this team is not blessed with a bunch of picks right now, at least. But as you pay attention to the combine, as you focus on whatever positions you think are important, what's to the top of the list on your request sheet when it comes to the Vikings 2025 draft?
I guess you got to look at it as wants and needs, right? And right now, the needs are going to be 2 running backs. Even if you bring Aaron Jones back, you need 2 running backs.
Yeah.
Aaron Jones just came off, I think, his most productive year, most touches and everything else. I don't think you can count on that again 2 years in a row. With him being a year older, the whole thing. So I think you need 2 viable running back options, and then you have to really figure out what you're going to do in the defensive back room. You might lose 1 or 2 of your safeties. You've got at least 2 or 3 free agent corners. Yep. Mekhi Blackman coming back, but that's one guy. You need a bunch more than that. So those are the 2 positions I think that have the greatest amount of need to them. Now, the depth at defensive tackle, we're being told, is real. Depth, I heard someone saying today there might be 30 running backs drafted this year. It's like, okay, well, there might be some value later on.
Yeah.
But with there may be the ability to get a good playmaker at some point. And I think the main thing with us and our advantage with that is just with our scheme in Flores, it'd be nice to have a great pass rushing interior defensive lineman, but I think having a great run stuffer or guy can eat up some gaps up front and free guys like Blake Cashman so they don't have to take the pounding on base downs would be a huge asset as well. So, but yeah, I think running back and defensive back are the big ones right now.
I look at, the way the Super Bowl played out, the way the playoffs played out, and I guess sometimes there's a tendency to overreact to whatever team wins that year, that, okay, you got to learn the lessons from that team because it does change year to year, and not all teams are built the same either. But part of what does strike me certainly about the Eagles, and even really about Kansas City to a degree, in an era where their offense is not as explosive as it once was, is that there's a certain, at the line of scrimmage, especially with the Eagles, offensive line, defensive line, a certain emphasis on that aspect of, product development and drafting and so forth, and even physicality about the way you go about your business that does feel kind of throwback, it has a throwback quality to it. And I do wonder sometimes whether this organization gets that or whether this team emphasizes it to the same degree. I'm not, that's not always the pretty plays, as you know. It's just the solid play or the play up front that allows you to make whatever play you want to make with your, with your skilled people. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw what a lot of people saw, and that was just the physicality with which the Eagles went about beating the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs didn't, it's not like they out-schemed them or tricked them. It's almost quite the opposite.
Yeah,
they just said, okay, we're going to line up like this. You're going to run a counter. Our defensive end is going to take your guard and put them in the next county. And even though you guys have it all penciled in and all blocked up real pretty on paper, if you can't, if we're just going to blow things up and none of it's going to work. You put consistent pressure on a quarterback. I mean, Mahomes throwing 24 or 27 yards in the first half. I mean, whoever would have expected that out of him? That decision to be that physical wasn't made Saturday night before the Super Bowl.
Great point.
Right? They didn't get together and have a team huddle on Saturday night and say, "Hey, we're going to be fit." No, that's 2 weeks of preparation, if not more, to say, "Yeah, we're gonna beat these guys in the trenches." And I think for the Eagles, obviously, number one, it's kind of their identity being in Philadelphia. But offensively, I think throughout the year, they took more and more, I think, off of Jalen Hurts' plate.
Yeah.
And depended more and more on that offensive line and on Saquon Barkley, that it just evolved that way. And then they got to the Super Bowl. It got them to the Super Bowl. And then when they got there, they just kind of finished it off that way. Right. They had that momentum through the playoffs saying, hey, we run the football. We're a physical team up front. Jalen Hurts, you're going to give us move the chains on us a little bit. And, a couple good, accurate, deep throws because we got receivers that are going to get open, especially if they're packing the box to stop the run. And then defensively, same kind of thing. They just had the right mix of physical guys up front. But again, that type of play style, didn't happen the night before the Super Bowl. Those guys were building up on that all throughout the playoffs, and you definitely saw it. It was glaring. I mean, it was the most glaring one-sided Super Bowl we've all seen in a long time. And I think that's the one thing that you can walk away from that and say, my goodness, I mean, Philadelphia just absolutely, in this day and age of the athletes and the rule changes and everything, it's a wide open game. It's an athletic game. Yeah, it's still a physical game. So, in that regard, I think Philly executed it brilliantly.
Do the Vikings need more of that?
Yeah, every team needs more of that. I really do. I mean, there's only so much you can do on a blackboard. There's only so much you can do. I think you need. There's a balance there between, the old Joe Gibbs days when you would practice in pads on Friday and Saturday because coaches said, well, when we don't play in pads, we'll practice without pads, to this day and age where guys have to be 100%, and it's a longer season. So there's kind of a balance there that you have to maintain. And that's a tough rope to walk. But at some point, you have to understand the scheme is only going to get you so far, right? And you have to still be able to do certain things at certain times, and it's going to matter. And the footwork and the fundamentals that are very, very tough to maintain if you're not practicing or playing live. Those can whittle away, and I know that as a player. With Denny, we didn't practice with pads on a ton. And so we were always, on guard for those kinds of things. So I think every team can use that.
Last item for you today, Pete Bercich joining us from Indianapolis. You mentioned, obviously, you went as a player. Now, it was not quite as crazed then as it has become, obviously. But what do you remember about it? Is it intimidating? Is it overwhelming? Is it weird? Or what are the best Pete Bercich memories?
Yeah, it's definitely weird. I mean, you get off the plane, you fly down, and you get shuffled over to the facility. I don't even know what you want to call it here. This whole city that they have. Anyway, and you get physicals all night. The next day, you may have some meetings, and the next day you have a couple things. You bench press, and then you run and you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these guys are here for 4 or 5 days now. Right, so they're here for a very, very, for a much longer period of time. A lot more interviews. They talk to the media. I mean, it's a much more open process. When we were here, it was all top secret, hush hush, secret squirrel. I mean, you back in the day, you ran a 40. They wouldn't tell you what you ran.
Really?
They wouldn't give you your numbers. No,
Jeez.
It was all secret. We had to know somebody that you can get the results for what you did. So they were much more guarded back in the day, no question about it, than it is now. Now it's a lot more public information.
Yeah, it seems like you should have the right to your own, 40-yard dash. I mean, you ran it, but whatever.
I had the right not to run it or participate. So if I had
true.
a problem with the way the draft went, I could just not gone.
Yeah, that's the
problem.
Did you set a record then for a 40?
No,
okay,
not by any means.
so.
I was kind of hoping that they wouldn't tell anybody else when I ran. Let's just keep it between
We don't want to know.
You and me.
Whatever,
I have no. But again, that's the weird part, because I know that I talked to a handful of teams, but they all had different numbers, right? So there wasn't there was no one that said this is your 40 time. Everybody I talked to had a different number, so it's like it was just
that's crazy.
A weird, different time.
We appreciate you checking in with us from there. Have fun while you're there, and we'll hopefully talk soon. Thanks, Pete.
Sounds good, Dan.
Appreciate the help as always. Pete Bercich, of course, part of the Paul Allen crew on game day Sundays, the radio analyst of the Vikings, long-standing KFAN contributor as well to many, many different programs. We always enjoy catching up with him at this time of year. If you'd like to react to our discussion, you know how to get a hold of us. The Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line is open. That is 64686. Back in a minute.
Into Williams. SGA, 39 points on the night. Penetrating in the lane. Blocked! Edwards got it. Shannon holds it. And he's fouled. They get it into SGA. Down by 3. Shea puts it up, off the heel, tapped out. Minnesota pulls off a shocker against the Thunder. From 25 down, Minnesota wins 131-128, ties the largest come-from-behind victory in franchise history.
The voice of Michael Grady, who, of course, chronicled all of one of the more improbable comebacks, as he mentions, in Minnesota Timberwolves history. He is with the club in Los Angeles, California. The Wolves preparing for the Lakers next on Thursday night. And Mr. Grady joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Welcome back to the program. I'm trying to figure out from your vantage point, because you're working the game. So part of your job, you may not even have time to be conscious of, is this really happening, as you're attempting to describe the action. But I'm looking at the play-by-play. I think Naz hits a three-pointer with 2:17 to go to cut it to 9, to single digits. So is it at that point you're going, or even then were you dubious that the Wolves were going to be able to complete this thing?
Dan, it still hasn't sunk in that they came back and won the game last night, to be honest with you. You're calling the action as it unfolds. You're leaving a window open for a miracle. But if you had told me that the Thunder would go the final 3 minutes and 55 seconds of regulation without scoring, with arguably the best scorer in the game, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, on the floor. And the very least, he's getting to the free throw line to knock down a couple of free throws. I mean, the number of attempts that he had in the line in the game itself, 17 free throw attempts for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this is a tremendous effort. Even if the Timberwolves go down, Chris Finch has to be pleased with what Terrence Shannon Jr., with what Rob Dillingham, what Jalen Clark, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Jaden McDaniels are out here doing. And going back to the 355 for the Thunder without scoring, this is also with Anthony Edwards on the bench.
Yeah.
You've got no Ant. You've got no Rudy. Of course, no Julius and no Dante. And you have, you have kids on the floor right now against the number one team in the Western Conference on their home floor, where they've only lost 3 times the entire season. And so, yes, you're leaving open the possibility that, okay, maybe a miracle could be pulled off. But still, there's this thought that, okay, SGA is going to do something to close the show, and what we're going to do is end up applauding the effort. But what ended up happening was one of the more remarkable comebacks that we've seen in franchise history.
Downhill, downhill, downhill. That's what I loved down the stretch. And as you mentioned, in many cases, it's the kids just saying, well, I don't give a damn. I'm just going to go with the ball, and I'm going to go to the hoop, and I'm either going to score or I'm going to get fouled. And that worked to a large extent, was it not? It was definitely less a jump shoot. Now, again, Reed hits a three-pointer with 2:17 to go. They needed every basket, obviously. But the rest of it, as you well know, was taking the ball to the basket and either scoring or getting fouled, which I loved.
And playing solid defense again on the other end, and then cleaning up the defensive glass. And then to your point, Terrence Shannon only has one gear. And he's going 150 miles an hour, and his corner crashing, his ability to get to the cup helped out quite a bit. McDaniels with timely shots and seeing his confidence continue to grow. I asked Chris Finch before the game about McDaniels, who gets a lot of open looks because of how frequently Anthony Edwards is double-teamed late in ball games. And he hasn't always had a ton of success with these big moment threes. And I asked Chris Finch about it, and he said what they encourage him is, just don't think of yourself as primarily a three-point shooter in those situations. You can get to your spots and make other plays. And then sure enough, with Minnesota trailing by 3, they could have gone for a three-pointer from McDaniels to tie the game up. But instead, he takes Caruso off the dribble, gets to the cup, and gets an old-fashioned three-point play. It was so great to see McDaniels have that moment and see, again, his confidence continue to grow in that, oh, this is what I can do on a night-in and night-out basis. And it's been amazing to see him blossom. Same thing, of course, with Naz Reid. Nickeil hit big shots, had a jumper from the free throw line that was massive in the ball game. And then going back to the young guys, you don't know what you don't know. And it is a luxury to have guys out there with the mentality of, why not? 25 down?
Yeah.
I mean, what? I don't care. Let's go. And it was just that type of gritty, we believe in each other attitude that I think could certainly be contagious moving forward as this team continues to get healthy.
Well, that's, I think, the next obvious question and what everybody hopes for. That, look, there's 82 regular season games. There's mythic things that happen almost every other night, and they don't necessarily translate. They don't necessarily get carried forward. But what you hope is, especially for a team that's still sort of trying to find its way, and as you say, get healthier as well, I'm assuming the hope that this could be a departure point, right? That there's some stuff that they could get out of this, that when we look back on, the rest of this regular season and prepare for the playoffs, you go, well, that's where some interesting things started, coming together perhaps. And then they started getting their full roster back. That's the hope, right? That this could trigger something?
No question. And there'll be some growing pains as you get guys back, and Chris Finch has to tinker with lineups, who starts, how the rotations look. There'll be some growing pains with that. But I think that what we've seen as the season has gone along through the ups and downs is that the guys are playing more for each other. I think earlier in the season, as roles were being defined, it's, Is he taking minutes from me? Is he taking what's my situation? How am I being used? And now it's, what can we do to help the team? We're not seeing bad body language. We're not seeing negative vibes. We are just seeing guys who are, how can we help the team? If this guy is out here on the floor in this situation, even though I would love to be out there helping the team, I'm cheering him on. And it's that kind of sacrifice that helps elevate basketball teams when they're trying to achieve the ultimate goal. And some of the best teams in the league right now, they all sacrifice.
Yeah.
We see deep rosters with whoever's out there on the floor, go get the job done. All I care about is winning. And the more selfish teams struggle, and they don't really figure it out. What we're seeing with the Timberwolves right now, we're seeing guys step up. We haven't talked enough just about how debilitating it is to not have Dante out there, to not have Julius out there, two guys who were playing their best basketball at the times that they got hurt. Now you have no Rudy Gobert due to the back spasms, and hopefully that's not a long-term thing. The fact that they have had to rally around each other, figure things out, elevate their games, use three rookies at times out there on the floor, and have had the success that they've had in their effort to keep things afloat is commendable top to bottom. So if that sacrifice continues as they get healthier, the schedule will smooth out as we step into March and into April.
It will.
And there'll be great opportunities to gain some ground in this extremely tough Western Conference.
Yeah, the schedule that looks so daunting for this moment does get a lot more inviting. You're 100% right down the stretch, and I'm sure you have all the numbers and analytics to prove that point as well. You mentioned here part of the challenge is the obvious, is you're talking about veteran players that you have to reintegrate. They're too good. They're too important to whatever you're trying to figure out. And yet, in this interim, we've seen some interesting, I think, very compelling contributions from the kids. And that not always playing great, but always, I think, playing hard. And sometimes giving the team a little extra voltage, a little extra juice. So is there a way, once you get the veteran guys back, to still occasionally accommodate some of these young guys? Is there room for everybody? Because that, as you know, is always the challenge, putting it all back together.
Yeah, I think it'll be, I hear Chris Finch talk about this a lot. I think it's going to be situational. I think it's dependent on what the team needs. I think there's going to be situations, given Jalen Clark's pedigree as a perimeter defender, where he better stay ready because there's going to be opportunities to get out there and compete and battle when you need him in that situation. If the offense is looking somewhat stagnant and it's moving to east to west, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, Terrence Shannon Jr. is a north-south basketball player. And so his aggression in getting to the rim, again, corner crashing, all those things, there's going to be opportunities where you're going to need that. An additional ball handler at times, a guy who can get his own shot. Rob Dillingham is going to have his moments. The big challenge for those guys is just understanding that they need to be patient, and that with a veteran club that has high aspirations and a lot of talent, there's no guarantee that you're going to get significant minutes every night. So you have to show the professionalism of staying ready, making sure that when your number is called, you're ready to go out there and contribute. Whether you're given 3 minutes on a given night or 11 minutes on a given night, you have to be ready to contribut. And I've really been pleased with what we've seen from them in that regard. And that will be an even bigger thing to keep an eye on once Julius and Dante and guys like that are back in the lineup.
Let's talk about the politics of this, too, because I think, obviously, Julius is accustomed to starting, and I think that Reed has been very effective as a starter. So, you know how the way this league is set up. Does that make this delicate? Does Randall have a right to expect fairly soon, once he's healthy enough to get integrated, to regain his starting lineup or starting position? Are we past the politics, you think, with this team for the reasons you laid out? That, hey, we got to do whatever we got to do at this point to give ourselves the best position, to put ourselves in the best position to get back in this thing and be a feared team in the postseason. How do you think that's going to be played out, and how ticklish do you think that will be?
Yeah, I think that's the only way for this team to succeed. is if guys are willing to sacrifice given the situation. You can make arguments on both sides. Again, Julius Randle was playing extremely strong basketball at the time that he went down with the injury. Naz Reid is averaging 20 points as a starter so far this month. And anytime he has been asked to start, he has excelled in that role. If Naz Reid were to go to the bench, I don't think anybody would have any concerns with that. He is the reigning sixth man of the year. He is okay coming off the bench and providing a spark. And if Julius Randle is asked to do the same thing, and it may even be a necessity. I think he wants to come back once he's 100%. But even getting your time and getting your rhythm, that whole thing could take some time to where,
sure.
I don't think anybody would be surprised if initially they ask him to come off the bench. And then once he's really fully integrated and has his rhythm and timing once again, then we'll see what happens from there. But the only way for this team to be successful is, because we talked about heading into the season, this team has 7 starters. And that means that guys knew that they would have to sacrifice. Now, there's a whole process of getting to know each other as men, teammates out there on the court. And while you're figuring things out early in the season, not a single team in the NBA is taking it easy on you. They are coming for your throat night in and night out, which leads to adversity. We saw that in Toronto earlier in the season. But as time has gone on, we've seen the relationships strengthen. We've seen them get stronger. We've seen better body language out there. And so I would like to believe, along with everybody else, that given the fact that we're in this final stretch, we're in a dead sprint through the rest of the season and into the postseason, and they are fighting for their lives to get out of a play-in. And there are other teams that are right there on the hunt. Golden State is right there. There are other teams right there. It is going to be a battle. You have to focus on what is best for the team. And if they're able to do that, I still say to this point, the sky's the limit.
Jaden McDaniels last night, 42 minutes, 9 for 16 from the floor, 9 for 9 from the free throw line, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and only 1 turnover with 27 points in all. Where is he? What do you see? What do you observe in him over the course of the last, 6 weeks or so in terms of his development and where he sort of fits in, and even projecting looking forward to what might be fair to expect of him to add when it comes to the postseason?
From the moment that I walked in, there were 2 guys that I became extremely fond of, and just watching them night in and night out. One was Naz Reid. The other was Jaden McDaniels. I love the way Jaden McDaniels competes on the defensive end of the floor. He has somewhat of a thankless job. I think I would equate it to offensive linemen in the NFL. The quarterback gets a lot of attention. Wide receivers make spectacular plays. Your running backs, but you really don't win without these offensive linemen who don't get a lot of attention and a lot of love. And I think guys like Jaden McDaniels, who, I may not get a lot of touches on the offensive end, I'm given the toughest defensive assignment every night on the other end of the floor. And I'm not going to get a lot of fanfare or attention. And that type of selflessness I really appreciated about Jaden McDaniels. I hated the fact that he missed an opportunity to end the postseason with the hand injury when he was frustrated, and he missed out on that first round series with Denver, because every postseason gives you experience, gives you confidence, gives you things to work and build on. He was able to get that experience a year ago and had some good moments in that run to the Western Conference Finals. And then from there, Danny put in so much work in the offseason. Anybody you talk to, they would say, Jaden's in the gym. Jaden's putting in the work. Jaden's putting in the work. And then just before training camp, they make the big trade, and Dante DiVincenzo comes in. And so now there's this shocker of this big move that's being made. And then now Jaden has someone who, again, relationship is strong and great and everything. But if Jaden misses a couple of shots in big moments in games, you don't think that psychologically you're looking over your shoulder a little bit? And that you're playing a little bit of mind games with yourself, that you have someone else out there who plays your position? Different skill sets. But if there's a situation late in game where you need buckets, it might be Dante that you would turn to in that situation if they're not out there on the floor together. So I think mentally there were some hurdles that he had to get over. And I've always been a firm believer that if you put in the work, the work will eventually show. And it took a while. It took some ups and downs in the early portion of the season. But the hard work that he put in the offseason, working on his game, is really starting to show. And it's paid dividends for the squad as they've been without Dante and without Julius for an extended period of time. The challenge now will be, as more weapons come back, can you still be aggressive?
Yeah.
Can you still find your spots? You're still going to be asked to do a bunch on the defensive side of the floor. But on the offensive side, he's one of the better guys on the team in terms of finding his spots. He doesn't take a lot of bad shots. He knows where his spots are on the floor, and he shoots a high percentage of good looks out there. And I think that helps his basketball team. So when you have Jaden playing confidently, you have Dante, who, when in a rhythm, can shoot the lights out. Julius, if he can take advantage of matchups, can get buckets. And you have Anthony Edwards, who is top 5 in the NBA in scoring. It makes Minnesota so formidable, not to mention, again, the reigning sixth man of the year, 2 words. So there's a lot to get excited about. It's just a matter of keeping everybody's confidence up, keeping the ball moving, not letting it get sticky, as Chris Finch likes to say, because there's so many guys who could eat on this squad, and it's just a matter of keeping everybody fed.
Well, another key item to sustain this, and you guys have talked about it, obviously, on the air. Everybody knows the crunch time stats, the winning time stats for this club. They've been in basically every game, but they have not been able to close games as effectively as they did yesterday. From your vantage point, what is the key to solving that riddle? Because, again, they're in position. Obviously, they're not getting blown out very often at all, but they have to get more economical, better, I think, offensively at the ends of games more consistently. From your chair, because you're there every night, you see all of these games. Where do you think that improvement needs to take place to where we're not talking about this particular issue as much?
One, I hate that the injuries to Julius and Dante happened when they occurred. Dante's injury happened in the game when he put up 28 points in a loss to Golden State. Again, Julius was starting to play a better all-around game. He wasn't forcing shots. He was distributing. He was really taking in the instruction from the coaching staff, and it was really benefiting the basketball team at the time that he went down with the groin injury. The thing that you lose when those guys are out of the lineup are additional threats, and you lose chemistry when it comes to late game situations. And so now you're somewhat strained to a certain degree because you need guys who aren't necessarily asked in the clutch to be on the court or to take big shots now to step up in those moments. And I think we've seen great growth from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. We obviously saw what Jaden McDaniels was able to do last night. But if Julius is healthy and Dante is healthy, those are big-time weapons to have on the floor to help you build offensive confidence in late-game situations. So if Anthony Edwards, who is in the middle of a brilliant night, again, he's top 5 in the NBA in scoring, if he's having a brilliant night, and defenses, as we've seen, do everything within their power to get the ball out of his hands, I think we all would feel confident if he finds an open Dante DiVincenzo in the corner. I think we all would be comfortable if he finds Julius Randle, who has a mismatch inside in a late game situation. We haven't necessarily seen that. And I think as guys have struggled with their shot around Anthony Edwards, it's led to Ant himself taking some forced, tough shots. And what you want from Anthony Edwards, and this is something that Jim Peterson and I were commenting on during a commercial break last night. When you watch Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you rarely see him break out in a sweat. You rarely see him breathing hard. He always looks comfortable out there on the floor. He has a ton of weapons around him, and he picks his spots for when it's time to be aggressive. We didn't see that last night, but we've seen that over the course of the season from SGA. And so from Ant, you really want other guys to knock down shots around him so he doesn't feel this immense pressure late in games that I have to carry things on my back, that I need to make this spectacular knockout blow of a shot to win this game. No, you can be patient, pick your spots, pick the defense apart. If you have a look, great. If you don't, you have confident guys around you to make plays. And again, as they get healthy, I think, maybe that's something that they can build their confidence in as the chemistry grows. Again, once they get back full strength.
What's a better combo for this coming April and May? LeBron and Luka, or Steph and buckets, Jimmy Butler?
I've been impressed with the way Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry have been playing together. I want to see more of a sample size. I still feel that what the Dallas Mavericks did was unforgivable. And to let Luka Doncic go and join powers with LeBron James, to me, from a Dallas perspective, is unbelievably asinine. Not just to trade him, but to trade him within the conference in a team that you possibly are going to have to go through in order to win a title. And those two teams are going to see each other, of course, tonight. And I think Anthony Davis was spectacular before he was injured in that his first appearance with Dallas. But the fact that he couldn't finish the game was another reason why it was a questionable and a ridiculous trade to begin with, as it is. So for me, I'm going Luka and LeBron, a more dynamic, scary package than Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. Not just because I like those two from a talent standpoint, because I believe Steph and Jimmy Butler are dynamic, but it's also the pieces around LeBron and Luka as well, with Austin Reeves' confidence and other guys in that lineup. So I think we're going to have a spectacular postseason. It's going to be a bloodbath in the West.
Yeah, and I think for, a lot of people, obviously Oklahoma City's record speaks for itself, notwithstanding what took place last night, but I think there's still a feeling within the conference that, look, they have to go through the wars and prove they can handle the rigors of the postseason, no matter how well put together they seem to be. And I think that's part of what gives hope to other teams as well, is it not? They're a heavyweight, but they're not a postseason heavyweight. They have not sustained anything in the postseason to where you're going to give them that extra equity.
No, and that's the beauty of sports, because from the OKC perspective, they're out to prove everybody wrong. Mm-hmm. They're a young team, still one of the youngest teams in the NBA. They have the presumptive MVP in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a first-time All-Star in Jalen Williams. They have the top defense in the NBA. They're fourth in the NBA in points scored. They score and they stop you, and they're potentially the road to an NBA championship is going to have to go through OKC. They're battling with Cleveland for the best record in the NBA right now, but they hold all the cards. But what they don't have, to your point, is what makes it compelling, that if they have to face the Lakers in a 7-game series, and you have all that experience with LeBron and the confidence that he has and that he gives his teammates and being rejuvenated around Luka Doncic. If it's Golden State, if they continue this surge, if it's some of the Denver Nuggets, if it's some of these other teams that have the experience, a championship experience, which is an incredible intangible when you're talking about a 7-game series in terms of poise, not getting too high or too low, and understanding it is a journey. It is a marathon, not a sprint. Even in a 7-game series, those intangibles will make for a compelling 7-game series, no matter who OKC sees down the road. And I'm elated to see it. Look, the Timberwolves had to go through that same journey. And even the losses, you learn from them. You learn from the losses. And last year was excruciating against the Dallas Mavericks. And so it's an opportunity to learn and build from that. And all those stabs, if you will, should benefit you in the long run. It's just a matter of how quickly you learn those lessons, and if you elevate your game when the lights get bright again.
Excellent work. Good to catch up, and we'll try to stay in touch as we hit down the stretch here. Thanks again for the time.
Anytime.
Have fun in L.A. Thanks, Michael.
Appreciate you, brother.
That's Michael Grady, the TV voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I've said a couple of times. I think I said on this show, or maybe I tweeted it, that the first time I heard his broadcast, it might have been a Wolves preseason game, I said, well, this is solved. They answered that question. You could tell. I mean, there's certain individuals in that particular business that it doesn't take much to go, this guy's got it. And he clearly does, to the point now where you're occasionally hearing him on, we didn't talk about it tonight, but on ESPN games as well. That's always going to be the big question with him, right? Is, well, can you keep him on your team doing your team's games exclusively once the bright lights start calling and other people figure out, well, this guy's national. This guy's, capable of being as good as anybody who's doing a national broadcast.
We hope that he takes a page out of his mentor, one of them, Ian Eagle's book.
Yeah,
as a guy
right.
who does all of that. Mike Breen does all of that.
That's true.
We hope, because to your point, it was like last March we were watching the game, and my wife, who, as you know, is not exactly locked in on sports all of the time. She's become a Wolves super fan.
Other than Beverly.
Pat Bev. She loved Pat Bev. And then there was a morning period, and she stopped whatever she was doing, and she said, who does the games for the Timberwolves? I said, Michael Grady. And she goes, he's incredible.
Yeah.
I said, yeah.
It's the
I
combination.
told Michael that. He stopped her. He just stopped her in her tracks.
Yeah.
It was like she lost it herself in his voice.
Right.
It was crazy. And it's how he called it.
Yeah. Well, it's a combination of how well he calls a game, but then there's just the pipes.
Correct.
It's that. And then when you got both, that's where you're set for as long as you want to do the job. Top of the hour break, we will review a couple things that he had to say.
Speaking of play-by-play guys,
yes,
maybe a live listen-in when we come back to see if Grim rips the refs. Gophers Northwestern about to tip off at the barn on News Talk, Twin Cities AM 1130.
I can't wait.